So, first of all, I want to say, Jolenny, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule and being with me here on this podcast today. Um, it's such a blessing to have known you since how long now? 6 months? How long we've met?
Since July of last year.
Yeah. And, one thing I always found fascinating as when you jumped on the call, I said the words, like every time I hear your voice, I just calm down. And
Mm.
I don't know if you've gotten that feedback before. I have a feeling you have. But like, where does this calmness and this like very just you just always seem like so level-headed. Like, where does this come from? Is that actually always how you are? Like, what does that look like outside of just on our calls?
Oh my goodness. Thank you for that, by the way. And it is something that I hear often.
Mm,
I think, where does it come from? It's a pretty amazing question and such a big question. I think I've been through quite a bit in my life. I've been
mm,
through an immense amount of experiences that have been a catalyst for me to practice, acceptance. And I think, for some of us, the route to that has been through a lot of traumatic events or a lot of challenging events where the invitation was always to trust and surrender and accept. And I think at some point in my life, I mean, I'm in close to my mid 40s now. I said, okay, I'm gonna do more of that. And now my practice has been to really surrender to the day as much as I can every day. I mean, there's fluctuations and there's shifts and changes and things that I cannot control. And I think for the most part, I become quite good at just saying, okay, this is where we are right now. And maybe that's what you feel and what other people may feel into me, that I'm not at war with what is, if anything, dancing with it. And every day it's a different song and a different dance move, and I'm here as a student of it. So, yeah.
wow. And I'm guessing you haven't always been like this. It takes time, experience, as you mentioned, to get to this point. But I'm curious to know, like as in your childhood, as much, you don't obviously have to go into super detail, but um,
Mm.
I think like what's that quote? I forget what book. It's like when people that go through really hard times for some reason, like when they grow up, they become coach teachers, they get into some kind of work helping other people. So I'm guessing that your challenges must have allowed you to get into this space to help and support other people who may be going through very difficult times emotionally, mentally. And I know you also studied a lot of work as well, which I want to get into your education around this. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
tell me about maybe your childhood, a little your teen years. Like obviously, those are all challenging times for all of us. I think whether you were born very lucky with money and love and all this stuff, those people still have challenges, or born in a really third world country or anything like that. All of us have something. So I'm curious to hear about your childhood.
No, I appreciate the inquiry and the invitation for me to be more transparent and open here about my life. So I was born in a small town in the country named Venezuela, and
Mhm.
I was born and raised there. So I didn't get to the U.S. until about 28 years ago. So I was 15 years old when I came here. Um, and I was pretty much born into a young family. My mom and dad were 21 and 22 when I was
Oh,
brought out their belly, or my mom's belly. And yeah, they were very young people, and they were part of the evangelical Pentecostal Christian church. My uncle was, is to this day, a minister of many, many churches. So I grew up in a very strict conservative religious background,
wow.
um, and a very conservative environment. And I can tell you that, ever since I was a little one, what I can remember, I don't have vast memory of my childhood, but what I can remember is that I never really felt at home in religion, even though I felt at home with God, because that's
Right.
the energy or the spirit that I believe in. Religion was never a construct that I felt comfortable in. So that created a lot of risks and a lot of, potential uncomfortable moments for myself and my family, my parents, my uncles and aunts and everything, because I was being looked at as the rebel or the black sheep of the family, right? It's
Right.
also walking this journey as a woman who didn't quite look or feel like everybody else. So it wasn't that I was special in the sense that I'm better than, but I was different in my thought risk taking approach. Like I was not willing to succumb to a mold or a box. If anything, I was like curious always, and I was attracted to both men and women, and I had
Mm.
attractions to different types of music and attraction to different cultures and different religious systems and different belief systems. So I was always pushing the envelope as a young person, and let's say that was not easy. I went to a private school, also very conservative, very strict. We were not people of many means, but we had, just enough to have my brother and I go to private school and have a good life and a good home to go to. And let's just say that when I was 13, my parents and my brother experienced witnessing me get hit by a car, which was a very, very difficult thing for
Oh my
them
God.
and for myself. And when you speak as to like things that may have shaped me or molded me or helped me, you know, led me to become the space holder that I am now, all of
Mm.
these events, having grown up in a very restrictive environment, I had to learn a lot. And then this accident in which essentially I went into a coma after I had a traumatic brain injury. I had to relearn how to speak, how to move, how to breathe. I mean, it was
Oh
a
my God.
major, chapter of my life. Um, if you, I didn't want to answer it in this way when you first asked it, but the PhD of patience was learned in that process because I couldn't speak as my brain was thinking it. I couldn't move as my brain was hoping I could move. Everything was very much in a slow process. So there was a lot of going on inside in
Oh
those
yeah.
moments that I couldn't, let's say, change. I mean, the frustration, the anger, the disappointment as a 13-year-old, 14-year-old, 15-year-old going through that process, being an adolescent was quite challenging. So the consistent invitation was trust and surrender, you know. And for me, teaching myself, I will walk again, I will speak again, I will be okay. As a teenager, I was like, I will play again. I wanted to play soccer again. I wanted to run again. So yeah, I would say those were really, really challenging and also uh, inviting spaces for me to start the process of learning how to be more patient, more trusting, more surrendered in myself. But due to the fact that I was so young, I didn't know quite how to do that properly. So what followed was us moving to the US, me going through an identity sort of crisis at 15 years old. Who am I? I don't know how to speak properly. I don't know how to think properly. I don't know this language. I don't know how to move. There were so many things that were being ignited all at once. Um, and here we were, starting over as immigrants in such a beautiful country as the US. And what ended up happening is that um, in high school, I realized that I wanted to give room to my exploration of being with someone from the same sex as me and created a
Mm-hmm.
relationship and at the same time was entertaining opposite sex relationships. So more identity crisis
Right.
or
Oh,
more leaning into understanding my own identity, right? Because the container of the church or my culture wasn't really, uh, let's say, a flexible or supportive space for me to do that there. But here, it opened it. So there was a lot of questions and not a lot of answers at the time. And I fell into substance abuse and drank
wow.
and used other substances to also explore myself. And let's just say my life has not been a walk in the park, but I can see from this moment, I can look back and say thank you to everything I went through. There were a lot of challenges from adolescence to maybe my 30-year-old self. And there was also a lot of studying that I did during that time. I think during those years, I started leaning into wanting more answers versus asking more questions. I had been in the question since I was a little kid.
Yeah.
So 16, 17, I was like, I need answers. And that's where psychology, studying began and book reading really became pronounced. And, at the time, because I didn't have the resources inside, I also went to substances for those conversations, which, wasn't quite helpful for many, many moments. But
Yeah.
I can see also why that inquiry was happening. There was a lot of pain and suffering that I hadn't fully processed, that I hadn't fully digested, that as a kid I didn't know how to unpack in a conscious, responsible way. That was coming forward for me to deal with, and because not having the resources, substances became the space. And yeah, I had a bit of a journey with that.
And
Uh,
I want to rewind a bit, and I when you get into the car accident, how long did it take for your recovery process, or was your recovery process like years upon years because you had to relearn everything pretty much? It was like being born again in a sense, right?
Correct. I mean, the coma was, uh, you know, not long lived. I believe it was about 3 weeks. Um, but
God,
then
that's still long.
after,
Oof. 3 weeks.
yeah, I mean, some people have a lot longer than that. I think, medically, it's sometimes the normal amount so the body can begin to recover and those sorts of things. But coming out of the hospital was a real challenge. I was in a wheelchair. I was in, bed bound, and there was a lot of things that I couldn't do as a young person that I think it took me about a year to begin to be more mobile. And then shortly after I got better, my parents were like, okay, we're going to the United States. Venezuela was going through a big challenge, with the government, and there was a lot of danger that was being created through that transition. So we pretty much were looking for a safe space. And the moment that they saw that I was capable of, making some motions in the right direction, we evacuated and came here.
Wow.
Um, so yeah, I would say a year and a half for the initial recovery, year and a half, and then after that, it was, I would say, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, maybe about 10 to 12 years. The
Oh my
traumatic brain injury was not an easy thing to fully recover from, because I had a lot of cognitive issues. I had a lot of things that were happening that needed to be adjusted. So, yeah.
Wow. So did you, when your parents came to America, was it, you have family here, or were you like, your family was just, this is all we got? Me, my brother, my parents, and we're just figuring this thing out. As
And my
every
little
immigrant story.
doggy and the
And the
dog that
little
we brought.
doggy.
No, it was just us. And we
Wow.
came, and 2 weeks after we came, I was thrown into the wonderful world of high school. And I
Oh,
did, did not know the language. So recovering the brain, right? Recovering from such a big accident and learning a new language, understanding a new culture, new dynamics. All of that happened quite fast, and yeah, I mean, it was hard, but it was also helpful. I needed
Mm.
to equip myself with the resources to navigate the environment that I was living in. There was no retreating or withdrawing because that wasn't what the process was asking of me. There was only learning, and yeah,
My God, it's like the universe God was like, we're gonna make sure you have the ultimate learning process in the earliest time that you can. And one of the most difficult times I think for most people would be
mm,
around like high school because I think we all have identity crises in high school and trying to figure out who we are, where we stand, you know. I always say like high school kids are just brutal. Like they have no like sense of like I shouldn't say this thing. It's like no, I'm gonna say it and it may hurt
yeah,
and I don't care type of thing. I don't know how it is now, but back then I can only imagine that people didn't have this, you know, the internet that'd be like, no, this is not okay to say anymore. Back then, I'm pretty sure and I don't know did you move straight into Florida or was it a different state? Because I know every state is different in terms of
yeah.
culture.
We moved into South Florida, so
Okay.
there was both, a percentage of people who were Spanish speaking, like myself,
Yeah.
and there was a percentage of people that were not. Um, for me, I had 1 hour a day with classes that were Spanish English, and the rest was English. So I was very much
Oof.
lost for quite a bit.
Ah.
And I mean, I'm not here to say poor me, but it was challenging. It was hard, to both navigate it logistically and to navigate the friends and the age group that I was dealing with because I didn't sound like the rest. I didn't look like the rest, and there was a lot of making fun of me because of that. So it was, but I also, made it a goal that I wanted to play sports again. So that was the
Okay.
only, the not the only, but the other version of high school for me. I became really inspired and motivated to get better so I could get back on the field. And I did. I did. So my body was so resilient that it was able to manage to go to that level. And I played. I played a lot, and that sort of was my weapon in high school. I was like, I'm an athlete. I can play volleyball. I can play soccer. I can play softball. I can do track. I can do anything, and I was really good at it at the time. So
Oh, wow. And during this time, did you have any mentors or really close friends that were like really supporting you during all of this? I mean, you had so much internal turmoil and trying to figure things out internally, but and then the external world is also like giving you all these challenges. So you have this like two-prong effect of like, well, I'm trying to figure this out because of what happened, and I'm trying to figure this out because I'm in the new area. And it's really difficult to do that alone. So were there any friends or, you know, your father, your mother, anyone that really helped you were like, I can go to this person for safety type of thing?
no, that's a great question. And if there were people that were trying to extend that to me, I couldn't see it, or I
Mm.
may have not known how to receive it. So from my point of view today, as the adult that I am, I did not feel the support, not because it wasn't being offered to me, but maybe I didn't know how to welcome it at the time. And we were alone. It was my mom and dad were, first time immigrants in a very powerful, different speed kind of country. So they were making ends meet, working all day.
Wow.
And brother and I would come home to an empty home. So my support system was pretty much my team, soccer team members, my coaches, but there was no way in which I had a vocabulary, whether it was internal or
Right.
external, to speak of the things that I was feeling. So I felt a sense of community because I had practices that were hours a day, every day. And I knew that that was a consistent, safe space to go to, but there was no communicating on conversing of it. So I think that's one of the challenges, and I'm going to generalize something here that I believe children and adolescents move through, which is the inability to speak to the environment that they're experiencing within. So our inner emotional ecology is not, as a parent, to us, and then to try to translate that into communication to the other. It's not an easy thing to do as a young
Right.
person. We just feel deeply. We feel like overwhelmed, or we feel uh, affected, but we don't know the vocabulary enough to be able to speak of it. So I was in that space. I was like, I am
Like I know
feeling a
I have these
lot.
feelings. Yeah.
I feel lost. I feel overwhelmed. I feel all these things and have no idea what to do. Which is why I think, I resorted to receiving or welcoming some of the things that were being offered to me through my peers in school. And it became a bridge to, feeling a little bit more at ease for a little while. Like the drinking helped, or the smoking pot every once in a while helped, or these recreational spaces may have given me at the time the impression that I was being understood, or I was being held, or I was being supported. And it
Right.
wasn't that it was true. It's just I didn't have the grid or container to prove to me any different at the time. Yeah.
Oof. So you go through high school, all these challenges, figuring things out. You graduate. Do you go straight to college? Do you take some time off and just do work, or what happens after high school?
I don't want to make this conversation sound like I just been through a lot, but I mean, the truth is that I did go to college. I was given a scholarship through soccer, and
Oh,
what happened in high school is that I unfortunately became injured during trainings and games, and I had two knee surgeries,
oh
which I
my God.
recovered from after my
Okay.
accident. Imagine
I know. I'm like, what? Your,
that.
your body is just taking it all. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
And then I go from high school to college right away for psychology, and I end up getting injured twice. I break my right fourth finger, which you see here. I got kicked, and it just shattered some of the bones inside. I had to have a pretty significant surgery there. Recovered from that. Went back on the field. Injured my knee on the right side a second time. So I was off 2 seasons, and I ended up losing my scholarship. Um, and that, again, that not as an excuse, but as an observation, it's what continued to open the space for me to move into seeking the wrong support, which was substances at the time. So continue to study, and yet was medicating with other things. But again, these were the years in which so much was happening: accident, move, injuries, transitions from high school to college, transitions of, myself and the world, and understanding, in which really what I think was underneath it all is me wanting to be uh, answered, like I was looking for answers. Yeah.
Oh,
Which, yeah, the good point of it, I mean, after all these challenging moments, is that because there was so much pain, and there was so much challenge, and there was so much inquiry, I never stopped looking. And psychology became a really useful tool at some point in the middle of my 20s. I was like, okay, I'm going to get sober. I'm going to try this. And I did. Ended up receiving a master's in spiritual psychology in my late 20s, which was one of the most impactful crossroads, because I needed to open the doors of shadow work during that process. And although it wasn't easy to do, it was the beginning of a different experience of myself, the world, and others. So yeah, that's where I
What
became really passionate about doing the work that I do now. But go ahead.
Yeah, we're gonna get there because definitely like, I mean, we've been working together, and I'm like, yeah, we'll get there. But I wanted to know like what really, I mean, I guess all these accumulated to your interest into getting into spiritual psychology. But was there like aside from being the injuries, unfortunately, from soccer, and I've heard like soccer, I mean, in terms of a sport that really needs so much athleticism, it's soccer. Like football, yeah, cool. Basketball, yeah, cool. But the size of the field and how much running and the movements that people have to make. I always say like when it comes to an athlete, I think soccer players are probably the most athletic out of
Mm.
any other sport. Um, just from me watching and it's like, I do jujitsu and just like the fast movements that we have to do, I feel it like for 3 days after. And I'm like, if you're
Mhm.
playing soccer, you're doing this for 2, 3 hours. I mean, I think that's how long games usually last. And I'm like, and you're just running back and forth and moving your knees and your hips and these like ways that I don't know if the body was built to move that way,
Mm.
but it's just, it's just amazing, first of all. And I mean, grateful that you're able to walk and move. I don't know if you still experience any of the pains from those injuries, but it's just amazing that you were able to go through that. But accumulation of all these things, I guess that's what, probably led you there. Or was there any other catalyst that was like, this is what I want to pursue? Spiritual psychology, not just, to become a psychiatrist and to provide people with pharmaceutical drugs to help them with their mental health, or there's a time and place for that, you decided to go to this other route. So was there anything there?
Yeah, I mean, I think you presented 2 points. So soccer is something that I played always since I was a kid. I grew up with, my family was mostly, my cousins were boys. I only had one female cousin in my entire family. So the athleticism came from being around the boys, and really playing everything with them. And so I had a muscle memory prior to the accident to that. So it was
Okay.
sort of like something I want to go back to. But training and sports was something that I always did. And yes, soccer is we would train about 3 to 4 hours a day.
Well,
So
oof.
it was very helpful. It was very helpful. Um, and psychology and spiritual psychology, I mean, I initially went into it out of my own seeking of answers. So I did not think to myself at the time that it was a profession I was going to take on. I did not think it was something I was going to do. I had no idea what I was going to do. I mean, in high school, I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon assistant, okay, because of my own injuries with the accident, injuries with the
Right.
knees and the hands. I was like, well, maybe I'll go into a medical school and become a PA for orthopedics. And then I kind of did my research and saw that, many hours, many years, and I was like, well, I don't want to do that. And then I thought I was going to go into becoming an architect because I like design and I like interior design, all of these things. But when you're younger, you're just thinking and feeling into many, many routes. So
Right.
psychology was sort of in the background as it doesn't matter what I do, this is for me. I'm doing this for my own understanding, for my own inquiries, for my own insights. And the master's in spiritual psychology truly came because I felt that spiritually I was curious as to, a more broad understanding of the psyche and why
Right.
we're drawn to certain religions or why we're drawn to certain practices, philosophies, um, and again, always a curious cat, embodied as Jolenny, that uh, took me there. And I had met some people that had gone through that program, and I saw them from beginning to end, and physically experienced them really transform into beautiful versions of themselves. It wasn't like they became a different person. They just became a fuller person in themselves. And I was like, there's something here. So the master's program truly for me was like, I'm going to do deep work. It was a program that was um, curated in a sense that you are not being told what to do. You're going into a process of inquiry, and it's a very experiential program. So there was
Interesting.
about, let's say there was the direction of reading, but you would do that in between classes. When you go to class, you're doing what they will call trios. So you were in therapy sessions the entire time with your students or with your classmates. So I was attracted to that because I hadn't had that. And I'm like, I
Wow.
need to drop in. So, yes, the entire course was experiential. And you're reading and you're talking about it and you're doing some test and that sort of thing. But it wasn't you sitting in a classroom listening to the teacher and just inputting information. It was you taking guidance and then putting it into practice. Um,
The way
so
school should be. I
that's what
think.
attracted me to it because I'm like, I
Right.
have years and years and years of work that I have not known how to do, and I will be supported by people who have studied the subject and will be there to watch me while I go through it. So, yeah. And after my own experience of it and my own healing and witnessing and opening of it, I said, this is what I want to do. I want to be a tool and a space holder for people's healing and transformation. And it became clear during the process that I was being called to step into that position. So, mhm.
During those years of you doing that, you must have had a lot of healing done internally from that
Mhm.
experience. Was there, I guess, I'm curious if there was any like books. I mean, everyone that listens to this podcast probably knows like I'm a big book reader, so I have to ask about the books that you've read that really probably gave you a lot of like insight, or maybe that you still go back to this day just to be like, I need to, refresh my memory around some of these philosophies, theories, exercises, things like that. Is there any books
Oh my
that?
God, so many. We were reading about 5 books a month, and this is in a 2-year period, so quite a number. Um, but I remember Conversations with God was one of them at the time. This was back in the late 90s. And it really, really impacted me deeply. I read all of them at the time. Power of Intention, uh, Guilt is the Teacher, Love is the Lesson by Joan Borisenko was really impactful for me too. Um, Power versus Force was there as well by David Hawkins. I'm trying to think. There's so many books, so
That's
many.
hilarious that you brought up. I mean, two of them I just read in 2022, which was Conversations with God and Power versus Force. And I think Conversations with God was the book that probably made me cry and feel so much. Because it's
Hmm.
like you're reading that book and you feel, I mean, I can't speak for everyone else, I felt so heard. I'm
Hmm.
like, oh, these are questions I've had my whole life, or
Yeah.
like understanding about myself, or like how God, in this case, has created us for specific things. Because my biggest question is like, why are we here? I need to know. Like, why do we have consciousness? Like these are questions that have been
Mm.
riddled since I was a teenager. I was asking these kinds of questions, this makes no sense. Like we have
Hmm.
all these animals, but why did we have consciousness and emotions and all these things? Um, and yeah, that book just blew me. I haven't read the other ones. I think there's three. I only read the first one, so I have the others coming soon. But I can only imagine, based on the work we've done, it seems like you bring a lot from that book into the practice, and your practice is unique which I want to get into. I definitely want to talk on how you support people. And like, obviously, I don't know if you started working with people during your school or after you created your own practice, or did you work with someone else for a little while? Like, what got you into it? And then we'll talk about like your philosophy and how you work through with other clients, including myself.
Thank you. Um, so, because of the experiential nature of the process of the 2 years, um, there was a lot of on hands work that was happening. There were people within the program that were asking me to hold space for them during my training and during my learning of it. So, this was not a mastermind business, thought that I had in my mind, but let's just say that the work started during my studies because people were asking me to support them. And at the time, I was charging them $25 an hour. I mean, this was like in the 90s again. Um, and I was also managing an acupuncture practice in Santa Monica, California, where I was living. So the person at the time said, you can bring people into one of the rooms. Like, I don't mind you using one of the spaces for your sessions. And so that's sort of how things began. And some of my clients started referring other people, and I started doing that. And, here we are. I could have gone the licensing route, and I decided to go the coaching one because what was happening without my, let's say, creating of it was that people were hiring me that were not local to the state. They were not only in California, they
Wow.
were in different places. So if you're a licensed therapist, you cannot work with people that live out of state unless they have the address still connected to the state that, they're wanting to work with you from. Um, so I didn't want to be restricted in my reach or range of work, and coaching felt like the way to do it, and in an ethical way at the time. So um, things opened up, and I can tell you, Ruben, it wasn't the only thing that I feel clear about with me was I want to do this, but I didn't have a website. I didn't have, you know,
Right.
marketing experience. I didn't have anything. It was my 15 years of doing this work has been word of mouth referral entirely. So do I have some social media sharing that I do? Yes, but I would say the people that have chosen to walk into working with me have been through either meeting me in person and feeling called to continue the conversations, or referrals from other people, which I've been so grateful and blessed with. So, yeah.
Wow. It's so crazy because nowadays you'll hear people say you need to have, I know you have a website now, you have the
Yes.
social media, but most people are like, that's where you get majority of your clients. And from what you're telling me, it's the same as like my father has his own business and he doesn't have a website. He has like one Facebook page, doesn't do anything else. Everything is word of mouth. And he's very successful, like very
Yeah.
successful.
And I
It's
think for
insane
some
how that's so.
people, the way in which they're being trained, educated as to have a very professional, you know, streamlined presentation of their business is important. And I don't want to take away from that. I think
Right.
that is essential in this modern age. Um, and for many businesses, that's how they are able to communicate with their customers. I think in the line of work that I am, and given the work that I've done, I believe that there are higher forces or higher energies
Mm.
at play in which the work for me isn't to bring myself out to create a better website, although I would want to do, some of those things in the future. The work that has proven for me to grow my practice is for me to continue to do the work in myself, because energetically that is my
Right.
signature, that is my brand, that is my presence, right, in the world. It's who I am, is how I invite or welcome others to come into the work that I offer. So that has kept me on my toes in a beautiful way. I'm grateful for
Yes.
it.
And I want to, as we go into like how you work with people, I want to use myself as an example because I want to let folks know on how we met. And that was through Aubrey Marcus and the Fit for Service team had the Arcadia event in Las Vegas. And we met at a True Food Kitchen, one of my favorite restaurants, by the way. And I remember sitting with you and Ben, who I flew from California with, which was crazy. Like me and Ben met through the Fit for Service app. We're like, oh, you were both in California. Let's go to the airport together. We weren't too far from each other. We end up meeting at the airport instead because, again, we were like, where we were, it was like, oh, it doesn't really align. So let's just meet at the airport. We meet at the airport and we find out we're sitting right next to each other. All that
Wow.
accident. This wasn't planned. And I'm like, this is insane. Like, I thought we were going to have different seats. You know how it is, right? Like,
Yeah.
I didn't choose my seat on the plane, they choose it for you.
Wow.
And we end up sitting together. And then when we land, he's like, oh, I'm going to meet somebody. You're more than welcome to come. And I was like, sure, like I have nothing else to do. We have time until we have to check into the hotel. And, you know, come to find we all have lunch at a True Food Kitchen. We exchanged contact and you sent me a voice note the next day. And at the time I was going through a really tough time in my life. Really dark place. I wouldn't call it dark. I was just very confused. I remember us having that conversation. And you sent me a voice note and I listened to it in the middle of the strip and I started crying.
Oh,
And, you know, like it just hit me. I still have the voice note saved. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt so, what's the best word I can use? Felt so seen. That's the best way to put it. I felt so seen at that moment where I needed it the most. And you just decided to send a voice note. You know, we just met yesterday and I just felt so seen. Like you saw beyond, because I tend to put a facade in the beginning because I have, you know, we've talked about this. I have a ton of trust issues. I don't know, I've shared this before. And I'm always very like cognizant of how much I show and share with people when I first meet them, right? I'm getting better at it, but that's just where I was at that given time. And you sent me that voice note and I was just like, wow, this person, Jolenny, I need her to be a friend in my life. Like I need her on my corner, you know? And over the next few nights of Arcadia, we would, you know, find each other, hang out, talk. You know, I didn't feel connected to like the music or like wanting to be there. I always wanted to be in the tent. And for those who don't know, they had like a Burning Man-esque tent area where you can just sit. People were like, you know, doing all kinds of things there. Like it's just everyone to each his own. I just wanted to like sit and lay down and just like talk to people, which I did the whole, I think it was 3 days. And then fast forward, you know, I remember you saying you offered your support and anytime I needed it. And I was like, cool, I'll you know, maybe take you up on the offer. I didn't know. And then a few months later, I reached out and I was like, you know, I need some support because you came up during my trip in Mount Shasta as someone that I need to be in communication with often, or at least every now and again. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. And we started working together. But, you know, obviously I'm not like your first client, probably like your thousandth or something. But based on like how you decided to come in to that conversation, I don't know if it was different from others, but like what's your usual way of coming into a conversation with a new client? In this case, me, you know, you're going to meet with me. Do you have a specific set of things you're trying to accomplish, or you just kind of go in and like go with the flow? And like, how do you know that flow and where to take the conversation, or at least take that person? Because you're not telling me, you're not giving me answers. You're asking questions and then providing like a different set of lens when
yeah.
you're talking. Yeah. So yeah.
I love your questions, and they're not easy to answer. I would say, in the sense that they're profound. They're profound, and it's a compliment. Um, I think there is no strategy or system that I'm using, even though there's a lot of training
Mm,
that can allow me to think in those terms. It's like if you learn how to play an instrument, right? Let's say you know the chords that you're playing with, and at some point you allow the songs to be played through you because you know where to press
mm,
the strings or where to hit the keys, right? Or the pressure that you need to drum with, right? It's you need to learn the rules of how to play an instrument to be able to let go and allow spirit to do the magic with it in a way. I think I work in a similar way as to how I approach my sessions, how I approach the conversations with people. I've studied quite a bit to see different approaches and different strategies, different techniques, different tools in which you can support somebody. But I would say what I really feel that I have practiced the most is listening. And not
mm,
listening in silence, but listening to the body, listening to the mind, listening to the emotions behind the words that are being shared,
mm.
and listening also by presenting the same, presenting questions that would allow the person to hear something they haven't had the space to hear in themselves. So my intention is that not only can I hear you, but that the people I work with can fully hear themselves because the answers are right here. They're not in me, they're not in the books, and they're not in the course out there. The answers are residing within our own nervous system, residing within our own emotional system, mind system, you know, everything is in there. And I personally believe that we are in a society that moves at a pace that is very, very distracting. And because
Yeah.
of these distractions, we don't have full sentences of what it is that we're feeling. We feel, I always call it the scale. If we had a 1 to 10 scale to understand our feeling, we're sort of operating at a 1 to 1.5 range. It's like, oh, I feel this, and then, oh, look, there's the next thing, and I have to do this, and I got to go there. So
Uh,
there is so much distraction that the luxury or privilege of feeling something to its full range is not something that we're quite accustomed to.
right.
So I feel that my service and my work is to bring people into the spaces of feeling things fully through listening, through asking questions, because through that understanding of what the message is, then you can make more clear decisions into your future. So if there's a strategy is I'm here to help you remember who you are, you know,
Mm,
not through what I teach you, but through our mutual listening of what you're saying and feeling and experiencing. And once you know who that person is, then you can say, okay, this is what I'm going to do with my life. So some coaches say, I know what you need and I'm going to get you there, right?
right.
I
Right.
personally say, I don't know what you need, but I'm here to find out with you. Let's go into that inquiry and let's take away anything that it's in, on the way of that. So we can really see the essence that it's trying to express itself through you. And then we build from that because you have the answers.
It's so funny, and I'm a visual person, so I get a lot of when people tell stories. It's like pictures in my mind, and the
Mm,
picture I see as you're talking about how you guide people through is not as someone if we're walking the road of life, you're like, take my hand, let's walk together. And like when we hit this fork in the road, you're not like, let's go this way. You're like, which way do you want to go? And that's
exactly.
how I'm seeing, the vision, the visual of how you're, helping people walk down route
Hmm.
and then be like, when they're asking and questioning themselves, you're allowing them to be like, well, what's that bringing up? Like, how does that feel? Or all these other questions that you've asked me to really like delve into my own, because I'm always looking for answers out there. And it's just like, hey, wait, hold on. Like, let's come back into the heart,
Mm.
because the answers are there. It's very beautiful in how you work, which is why, like, and funny enough, when I was like seeking a coach around that time, a lot of my friends were like, you need to get a coach that's a man, because you're a man. They can understand you, type of thing. And something was telling me like, well, one, I don't know who I would go to. And two, I just felt so called to
Mm.
come and gain and have that support from you, because of how you've shown up to me. And you've said this before, the world's a mirror image of you. So whatever you're putting out, you're going to just receive more of. And I'm like, oh, there must be a part of me that I'm putting out that was able to meet Jolenny and say like, and see this, how you work and how you speak and how it just brings the room like into this calm state. And it's just like, you're safe, you're okay, you know?
Mm.
And it's really hard to find people that can do that, even over a camera. We're not in person. We're not, doing this face to face. We're on two separate time zones, right? But you're still able to bring that. And I think that's so powerful. It's beyond anything. And I know a lot of coaches because I was, in that industry, and I've never seen that before. So it's definitely some magic you have.
Thank you, Ruben. And I wish I could say it's magic, but I believe personally that we all have access to this. It's just, when you speak of visuals, I think imagine us being in an elevator with really loud speakers and you're trying to write or you're trying to think or you're trying to meditate. It might be hard because you feel constricted by the physical spaciousness and also by the sounds, right?
Right.
I would say sensory wise is not the right environment or container. The conditions are not set up for you to dive in. I personally believe that most of us navigating life with the loudspeakers in restricted spaces, whether that's through uh, unfinished business from the past, undigested trauma events, unprocessed grief, whatever the case is like all these things are pending in our nervous system. They're pending in our mind. They're pending in our emotional body, waiting to be given the space to be processed, listened to, addressed. So it's hard to surrender into that centered, regulated state if you have all that information, trying to get your attention. So I think the work really, when we do it, brings us here. And I am not a perfect person. I'm a perfect human that isn't perfect, right? But the only reason why I've been able to get here is because I've not run away from that work. I've not said, I can do this. If anything, my practice every day is leaning into it, not bypassing it, not transcending it, not overcoming it. My work is, how can I be with it? How can I listen to it? How can I integrate it into my being? Because I am very much human. I'm not trying to leave humanity. I'm trying to learn how to be in it. So I think the more that we accept that that's an experience that we're here to learn, the easier it's going to be to rest in our bodies. Because that anxiety, like, I need to get out of my body experience is just, if anything, being at war with the process that it's trying to complete itself inside of us. So we keep pushing it away. We're like, no, I don't want to feel that. No, I don't want to think that. When I personally believe that the more that we become comfortable leaning in, addressing it, talking to it, listening to it, seeing how it is that we want to guide it, the easier it's going to be to breathe in ourselves.
I'm curious to know how you do this when I'm pretty sure you hear some wild stories from clients. And, I heard this many, many years ago, like most therapists and people who do this kind of work, you're hearing all this like dark, like really dark stuff. And you have to like listen to it and be like, I mean, I'm pretty sure the way you are, you're not judging it. You're like, this is just the truth.
Right.
How do you manage that inside yourself? Because I've heard like therapists, for the most part, need therapists, right? Like, because sometimes they have to work through some really heavy stuff. I'm curious on, what you do to keep yourself so calm and just in line,
Mm.
and be able to listen to those things when those, clients may bring those really dark thoughts up.
Another great question. Yeah, some of the things that I hear on a daily basis are not easy, and I hear them for many hours a day. So
Yeah.
a lot of difficult experiences to hold space for. Um, but what I've chosen to do in myself is to both have the compassion, sympathy, understanding, empathy of what the person is experiencing, and at the same time see them through the filter of, and you're here. You went through all of that. You've experienced all of that challenge. You've experienced all of that pain, and yet you're here, which then allows me to see them as the resilient, powerful, beautiful, brilliant being that they are because they're still here. So I'm not seeing them through I am so sorry lens, even though I am sorry that they went through the pains that they've experienced. I am choosing to see them through I am so honored to meet you because I know what hard path you've had, and yet you're here. So I choose to see the power, and I choose to see the resilience. And for my own self care, I do nature time every day. That to me is a must. Um,
Mm.
we at home have four beautiful dogs that are rescues and are an immense source of unconditional love. And that is something that is, because I have the beautiful blessing of working from home, it's available to me at all times. And I also go outside and walk every day 5 miles, 90 minutes a day, in which I'm connecting with the trees and connecting with the clouds and the passing flying birds and squirrels and cranes and all the things that we have on this side of South Florida. So for me, and this is a personal choice that I've made, as long as I continue to connect with an ecology that is not fighting itself. If you look at the
Mhm.
animal world, they're not walking around saying, why am I a dog? Should I be a different dog? Maybe I should go to school. Maybe I should dress differently. Maybe I should do another podcast, right? There is no stuttering of self. So this is a philosophical thought for me, but I realize that as long as I'm connecting to that which is in full expression and not fighting of it, I can regulate and I can remember and I can reattune to the truth of who I am, which is the same thing. So that is a very, very important hack for me. If I am in technology and if I am in traffic or if I'm in different places that are in that stuttering place, right? It's like things are not happening at a natural state. They're
Right.
fighting itself. It's a mirroring of what I'm dealing with in this conversations. But if I go into nature, there's no fighting. There's only contribution and collaboration happening at a deeper level ecology system. So I'm tuning into that radio frequency, which is the
Mm.
truth of who I am as a body, as a being. My entire body, my entire system, it's trying to work into collaboration and contribution with me. It's not trying to fight me, it's trying to work with me. So you find that match, and it's like, oh, I feel better. Yeah, you feel better because that is who you are. We are nature. So that was a long answer, but
No, it was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I was like, I definitely have to clip that. Because that was just beautiful. But I know we're coming up on time, and again, busy schedule. You have clients, and I want to respect your time. So I have one question I usually ask at the end with every guest. It's called the Ponder podcast because, you know, I'm very curious, just as you started this podcast talking about curiosity and what it led you to. And obviously I'm curious to know what is something you're currently pondering or that's taking up a lot of real estate in your brain.
Haha. So something that opened for me 3 weeks ago, and it opened through meditative practice, was
Mm,
really, thinking about how can I welcome more life force energy into my being every day. And
mm,
it wasn't like, oh, let's work out more, let's drink more water. It was really beginning to be in the inquiry of like, are my choices supporting life force energy, or they're limiting it? So
mm.
I am in that exploration of like, it's my day, dedicated to contributing to more life force or less. And where I'm needing to adjust, I'm adjusting. So nutrition wise, lighting wise, things that I'm partaking as supplements or drinks or choices that I'm making throughout the day, everything is being restructured through that lens right now. And that's where I am right now. So that's something that feels um, important, because I think what I'm seeing in my clients and the people that I'm working with is that I'm exhausted, I'm stressed, I am confused, I'm anxious, which, if you look at it from an energy lens, that means a diminishing of life force energy.
Oh yeah.
So, how do we open the lens a little bit more to welcome more of it? What conditions, what elements, what choices do we need to make sure that we're in the opening of it versus the restriction of it? And that's where I'm at right now.
That's beautiful. Now you're like, I'm thinking like, what do I'm doing? What am I doing to bring more life force, energy? And it's like, moving here where I'm living currently definitely helps so much. And I think we spoke about that, in a recent, session, but it's amazing what things, and I think that's also an idea from power versus force. And it's like these, depending on where you're at, like some things just remove energy, make you weaker. I think he uses that as an example, versus these other things like love, gratitude, and all of this that kind of bring you more life force, bring you closer to having more energy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, and it's funny. I was talking to a buddy of mine, and I'll say this, and then hear your thoughts, and then we can close out. But I do this wheel of life type of thing where I kind of like rate where I feel I'm at from a scale of 1 to 10.
Mm-hmm.
And for the last like 3 years, spirituality has been the lowest score. It's
Uh-huh.
always existed between like a 3 and a 4. And I'm like, oh, geez, like I really need to focus on everything else is great. I'm at a 7, I'm
Mm.
at an 8, I'm at a 9, these things. But spiritual like practices or energy has been so low. So it's like, this is something I get to improve. And I think that ties in well with the life force energy. Because it's
Right.
like, how am I supposed to feel in my body, in myself, and just understand that I'm a great being. Like, I got lucky to be on this planet.
Right.
Like,
And
you
that's sort
know?
of what came through in that meditation. It's like
Mm,
I was working through some of my past story, now 30 years
mm,
ago of the accident, in which I realized that there's some parts of me that were still in that bed in a coma. And what
wow.
what followed that was like, Jolenny, you are alive. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so alive. I had this personal breakthrough, right? Which is not new information. It's not
Right.
something that isn't obvious, but to me, there were internal parts that were still at rest, that were part of my self saboteur mechanisms, that I was like, oh my God, no, guys, we're online. We are alive. So, how do we feed that aliveness? Through choice, food, nutrition, light, natural choices, all these things. So, the conditions in the environment, it's really saying yes to that life force energy, saying yes to this aliveness that we have in this, current moment. We are alive. And are we supporting that or restricting that? It's really, I think, a supportive, beneficial inquiry to have.
So, got to tell the folks they need to ponder on that and start really thinking about what's bringing them that life force energy and what's taking
Mm.
it away. So, Jolenny, thank you for your all your wisdom. I have so many places. I was like, I'm gonna take all these clips. It's like just repeat them in my head, like I gotta remember this and just brand it in there
Mm.
in my heart, most importantly, put it there and just be you know, especially with the current state of the world. So it's been such a pleasure having you on and speaking your wisdom and your knowledge, your story. Thank you so much for sharing it with me, with the people who are listening. I definitely let folks know where to find you if they felt called to work with you through this show. Best places to find you, where you want to send them to.
Thank you so much, Ruben. It really has been a pleasure and an honor to be here with you, and your questions are so amazing. So thank you for asking them. People can find me on my website. I have a website that is called Sacred Soul Living. Maybe that's something that you can add as the notes for the show,
Will
or
do.
they can find me at Sacred Soul Living on Instagram, and there'll be ways to contact me there. I'm still working with clients. I think I'm going to do this for the rest of my life, and happy to. So yeah, anyone that wants to message me and connect with me, they can find me there. Hmm.
Yes, please reach out and work with this beautiful soul because it's no one like you. You are
Oh,
so unique. It's in the most beautiful way. And I appreciate you. Thank you.
appreciate you too, Ruben. Thank you so much.